Chilly. When it's sunny, you get the cold.
Yeah, yeah.
When it's cold, when it's miserable and wet, you get it a little warmer.
Right.
Can't rain in winter around here.
No, yeah. We go see Michael for a second.
Well, just to hold all the layers close. I've got an extra scarf if anybody needs it. Andrew, what about you? Is it just no, it's good.
No, not actually layered.
Because you're deciding, like, you're going to get a lot of example or
Are we masked on? No, you can have it. It's optional. Yeah, I have That's why I put my mask on, actually. Hello, Rabbi. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you? It's not raining. It's not.
I know. Yesterday, it's beautiful.
It is. It's gorgeous day. Yeah.
I know.
I know it was very foggy this morning and all burned off.
I think it's to the end of the day.
over in Surrey.
It is. Well, it's sunny in the trees. Oh, I know.
But I didn't realize that.
I know. I'm okay. Keep charge on. RV park. Really fast. Oh, wow. I'm driving to I'm going to
Hello.
yeah, to be gone.
Hey, now.
I know.
I thought when I came through here, it looked like it was highlighted purple. Oh, I'm not there yet. Coming. Where do you think? I don't know. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. In case we have.
Yes, okay.
I don't know if that helps.
I wonder where I know you from if I've been on the street.
I don't know that we've met.
I don't know. So I've mostly run into Rachel lately and you talked about it. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I can see another trip to Costco.
Yeah. So
Oh, it's brutal, isn't it? Glasses and a...
Hey.
you could tell right away when the weather changed.
I know.
Because all summer you don't fog up, right? And then all of a sudden fall comes. And here, what happened? I thought I mastered it.
I end up just taking them off.
Yeah, I can't see anything. So yeah, 6 to 1. Either way.
Oh, this is, oh good. This is being filmed.
What?
It's being filmed.
It's being live streamed. They're live streaming.
I know,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yes.
Which is great. The people who,
Yeah. All these things.
Brian. Sure is. Get up there, though.
Nice. Thank you.
very, very with the voice.
I know.
really cold.
If I could ask the pallbearers to come stand at the coach with me, please.
Hi, Karen.
I thought I'd gotten close to Queen Bee. I was at least 6 words out.
Michael, we'll wait till you can.
Yeah. Someone on this one?
So friends, you're welcome to come and fill in. Those that need a place to sit, let's make those available for those that need it. It's like every shul in the world, nobody sits in the front row. Please sit down. Esainai, Echarim, Me'ayin Yahavo Ezri, Esainai, Echarim, Me'ayin Yahavo Ezri, Ezri, Me'im Adonai, Osei, Shemayim v'haretz, Ezri, Me'im Adonai, Osei, Shemayim v'haretz. I lift my eyes up to the mountains, and what is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, the maker of heaven and earth. On this morning of all mornings, after all the rain that we have had, we were able to lift our eyes up to the mountains today to see the sun breaking through as it is just now, the beauty of this province, of this city, and particularly of this place. A beauty that Barbara and Judah truly enjoyed and amplified in their work. And so we come to this sacred place at this sacred time to remember her for blessing. Our tradition teaches that when a person dies, their soul, it goes up to heaven to help God run the world. We can think for a moment what Barbara would be telling God about how to run the world. That is a conversation I would love to witness. And I find that imagery tremendously comforting, but I know also, and I think we all do, that when a person dies, their soul, their neshama, the thing about them that is unique and special that we fall in love with, that was so uniquely Barbara, that remains here. It remains a part of this world if it remains a part of us. If we incorporate the lessons and the examples and the messages and the work of Barbara's life into our own, then her soul lives on. The body is just the vessel, just the container. But the soul, that is the spark that was so precious to all of us that we remember today. So what I'd like to ask you to do, we have things to do at a funeral. There's prayers to say, but more than that, there's memories to hold on to, lessons to draw from one's life. So what I'd like to ask you to do is to think about what you learned from Barbara. What was her Torah? What did she teach you? By her words and by her deeds. Michael and Cal will share stories in a moment. Those will help hopefully recollect some memories, but you have your own. And as you think of them, hold on to them, and tonight, as we join for Shiva, perhaps we can share them together and share them with each other. Jewish tradition teaches us that we should turn to the writings, to the prophets, to these ancient words that are attributed to King David. They're considered to be his journal entries, his diary of his own life and experiences, and to find in those ancient words, words of comfort and consolation for our present circumstance. And so I want to turn to some of those to share some words of Torah, of the Psalms, with you. Adonai, you have been our refuge in every generation. Before the mountains came into being, before you brought forth the earth and the world, from eternity to eternity you are God. You return us to dust and decree, return, for you are mortal. For in your sight 1,000 years are as yesterday when they have passed as a watch in the night. You engulf us in sleep. We are like grass that renews itself. At daybreak it flourishes anew, and at dusk it withers and dries up. The span of our life is 70 years and 10, or given strength 80 years. But the best of those years have trouble and sorrow. They pass by speedily, and we are in darkness. Teach us, therefore, so to number our days that we may attain a heart of wisdom. Turn to us, O God. Show mercy to your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we might sing for joy all of our days. Let your deeds be seen by your servants and your glory by their children. May your favor, O God, be upon us. Establish the work of our hands, that it may long endure. Psalm 90. There's so much in that psalm that evokes memories of Barbara and little vignettes of her life, but the verse that strikes me this morning Satisfy us at daybreak with your steadfast love, that we might sing for joy all of our days. Barbara loved life. She loved it so much that in her final hours together with her family, they raised a glass of prosecco and toasted life, l'chaim, to life. She loved life by having family and friends together at that ever-expanding dining room table with 3 leaves and more tables that Judah would bring if necessary, so that all could be present and all could eat delicious food that she also loved to share and to partake of too. I was told that she actually went and took a cordon bleu cooking course in France when she and Judah were there. Is that what Cal said? Is that right? One of you said
Shirley
that.
said that.
Shirley said that. Somebody. Okay, so we'll attribute it to Shirley. She was a fantastic cook, which is another expression of her love of life. Most of all, she loved being with all of you and people. This was a woman who took every moment of life to celebrate, to fill it with people, and to fill it with meaning. In another psalm we read, and this from Proverbs actually. I'm not sure, given as they described their Jewish life, that I'm pretty sure that Judah never actually offered these words to Barbara around the Shabbos table, but it is customary in Jewish homes on Friday night for the man of the house, if you would, in this traditional shtetl sense, to offer this verse from Proverbs, Eshet Chayil, a proclamation of the valor of the wife and mother. And though may she never have heard it directed to her, she certainly was deserving of it all of her life. Let me read those words to you. Eshet Chayil mi yimsa, a woman of valor who can find. She is more precious than fine pearls. Her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm, all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hands to the poor. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up and bless her, and her husband sings her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you Eshet Chayil, Barbara, you excel them all. Amen. Again, there's so much in that proverb that jumps out at us that speaks of Barbara and who she was and continues to be in our memory. To reach out to those in need and extend her hands to the poor. According to Natan Sharansky, who she met once at some function, who greeted her with a hug and a kiss, Barbara is the reason why Soviet refuseniks got out of the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union. We know very much in our city that Barbara is the reason why so many Jewish refugees from the former Soviet Union were settled here in Vancouver, and settled so well, with furniture and jobs that she procured for them by calling some of you and telling you and her children that you needed to move this furniture or hire this person or invite them over for a meal, as she did and Judah did to their home. 36 times in Torah it says to love your neighbor as yourself, ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, and to love the stranger. Barbara did that. For people that she knew only the littlest bits of information about, that they were fellow Jews, and even more importantly, that they were in need. And so she reached her hand out to those in need, extending it and doing it cheerfully. So incredibly inspiring was her work that the work of the Jewish Family Services continues to this day because of the example that she set and the priorities that she set for our community. The work that our synagogue is doing now to settle Syrian and Afghani refugees is because of the example that Barbara set and the template that she set for our community with Soviet refuseniks. That's an incredible legacy. That is truly a woman of valor. Another verse from Torah, this one perhaps I think probably more familiar. The words of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember her. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we remember her. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we remember her. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember her. So long as we live, she too will live, for she's now a part of us as we remember her. And so let me invite her sons to come forward and to remember their mother. Michael.
I didn't prepare anything, but you know, Mom was such an unconventional person, and a lot of my memories of her as a child are ones of frustration that she couldn't be normal, like all the other kids' parents on the block. Whether it was some quirky thing, like, you know, for some reason she felt that curtains in her home were too conventional somehow. She didn't want curtains. Instead, she wanted to make her own, and she took all this wool, and she made these weird sort of weavings that kind of sort of covered her windows. And well, I did like them. I felt I used to feel some shame about it. You know, kids would come over and sort of look at, you know, my friends would kind of look at these things askance. There's a story I've told many times. A lot of you have probably heard it. I'll say it again here, though, because it encapsulates her personality. We were new. We had moved on into a new block, and I had met a neighbor kid. And of course, in my mind, came from a perfectly normal family. Who knows what their family was really like, but that was the mind of a young child. And my new friend came over one day. And he rang the doorbell. He was calling on me. He rang the doorbell. My mother came to the door and she was angry at him. And she said, "We don't use the doorbell in this house. I want you to, the front door is always unlocked, and I want you to just walk right in and dig what's happening." I was 6 years old. And yeah, it was, at the time I felt like I could have crawled out of my own skin, but it's a memory that kept with me. And anyway, what this is all leading up to, I guess, is that on Mom's last day, suddenly all those things that I wanted her to be and that I thought she wasn't, actually were. And I heard the rabbi talk about valor. I can't pretend to have followed all of your words the whole time, but I remember you talking about valor. And the woman that I sat with yesterday, was valorous and honest and caring and loving. And I felt really at peace from that. It was a very special day that we spent with her. I think that's, just give me a minute here. Yeah, so all the, I think I wanted to end on my feelings yesterday, the strongest one after all those years of sort of carrying, honestly, a little bit of little boyish shame that my mother was so different and so outspoken and so wild. Yesterday, I felt predominantly proud of her, and I got the opportunity to tell her so. And I'm very grateful for that.
Unfortunately for you, I did prepare. It won't be nearly as heartfelt, but at least I'll work my way through it. Mom also instructed us all not to cry, so I'll do my best, Mike. You blew it. She's mad at you. On the last day of her life, Barbara lay in a large recliner in her living room. There were exotic flower arrangements everywhere and a Mozart piano concerto playing on the stereo. All of her children and excuse me, I did look at those beautiful children and grandchildren. All of her beautiful children and grandchildren sat around her to celebrate her life. Croissant sandwiches and Prosecco were served, but before we could propose a toast, Barbara stopped the proceedings. The floral patterned napkins that were laid out with the sandwiches needed to be taken away and replaced with white linen. The floral napkins were perfectly adequate. They simply offended Barbara's sensibilities. When Leonid Brezhnev imprisoned Jews for political purposes and refused to allow them to emigrate to Israel, it offended Barbara's sensibilities. She also felt there were no agencies in Vancouver that were adequately protesting the actions of the Soviet government, so she set out to single-handedly make a difference. She organized protests when Soviet ships were in our harbor or when Russian cultural events were staged here. She lobbied her members of parliament relentlessly to ensure they always kept the plight of Soviet Jews on every Cold War agenda. When Anatoly Sharansky was finally released from prison, as the rabbi mentioned, after much international pressure from the United States, he told Barbara that her work had kept his name in the international press long before anyone was paying attention. If not for activists like Barbara, and others, of course, there would have been no awareness of the refuseniks and no pressure from world governments. Barbara put this same energy and single-minded determination to everything she pursued. Whether it was producing and directing plays, writing books about Paris or the arts, reading Shakespeare with her grandchildren, or cooking up spectacular feasts for guests in her home, Barbara always held herself to the highest standard. And that's not to say that everything she produced was perfect. Her creativity in the kitchen was legendary. But her desserts were not really her specialty. One notable night, she decided to create a ultra-fancy cream custard from Julia Child's cookbook and enlisted my help, and I was whipping cream and beating egg whites, and she was laying out elegant chocolate lady fingers in a crystal bowl. And guests all seated at the table anticipating dessert we got to the point in the recipe that said, chill overnight in the refrigerator. Barbara cussed colorfully and scorned herself for not reading the recipe in advance. And then, without skipping a beat, she gave all the guests elegant little Japanese bowls. She brought the unset custard to the table with a ladle in the middle and announced that to the guests we were having custard soup for dessert. We can't talk about Barbara without a mention of her lifelong love affair with Judah. The two of them were an exemplary couple. The two people could not have been more different. He, rational, calculating, and cool. Her, impulsive, creative, and demonstrative. They fought like tigers, and they loved like Romeo and Juliet. They did not always agree. In fact, they probably usually disagreed about most things. Yet they always had each other's backs. Their combined strength was much greater than the sum of its parts. This strength sustained them through tragedy and elevated them in good times. In later years, they were inseparable, and even after Judah became physically frail, they continued to travel the world and celebrate the arts and entertain their many friends. Reunited now, you can imagine them. Standing together, holding hands, as they always did, and smiling. Thank you. Sorry, Mom. I had to cry. Oh, God.
Michael and Cal, thank you so much.
Yes,
I think tears are just our love coming out our eyes instead of our mouth or our hands or whatever.
my daughter just called me a wuss.
That will not have been a comment. I wanted to just add a couple of things. Been thinking a lot about names lately. Well, really, since Barbara's death. In part because Judah, her husband of 65 years, her beloved husband of 65 years, my son's name is Judah. And I remember when doing the Shiva that I had never done a memorial service for a Judah since he had been born. And so I've always had a particular affinity for your family in that regard. And as we were talking about your mom yesterday, the name that came to mind as you were describing her character was one of Rivka, which is not Barbara's Hebrew name. Her Hebrew name is Bracha, which I'll talk about in a moment. But Rivka was the character in the Torah, in the Bible, the book of Genesis that we just finished yesterday in synagogue, that I think is known most for her chutzpah. And I think that Rivka and Barbara have much in common. She was a ferocious advocate for her family. Rivka did, biblical Rebecca, had the foresight to see the potential in her children, in Jacob in particular, and passionately loved Isaac even though they disagreed on many things, just as you described a bit, Cal. But it was her tenacity for family, her desire to make sure that the family and its legacy would be protected, that caused her to do some pretty bold and unconventional things that, by today's standards, I think some family psychiatrists might say, this might have left a mark. But history has proven her to be right. Both biblical Rivka and Barbara as well. And then her Hebrew name is Bracha. And Bracha means blessing. And Barbara was among many of those things, perhaps most of all. She was a blessing. What does it mean to be a blessing? It means to be a gift to others. Blessing is that thing you give from yourself to another that is a piece of God that you find in that person, and you call it out, and you say, there's a piece of God in you, and that's the blessing that you're making. And Barbara did that with everyone here. And with everyone she encountered, she found that B'Tselem Elohim, that image of God in them, and she called it out, she held it up, and let them know what a blessing they were. And that's a blessing. I asked her children what were some of the lessons that they learned from her life. And they shared that they learned how to be very, very strong. That she was in charge of her own life and all of the decisions about it. She was always the one to make sure that everyone was loved and supported, and that they loved and supported each other. She loved Judah very much and came through the loss of a child and was not weakened by it, maybe even strengthened by it. She lost her father when she was 5 years old. Grew up in difficult circumstances. It made her stronger, not weaker. She taught all who knew her, to be strong by her example. And if you tried to come up against her, you'd learn what strong was. She also taught them to follow their own reasoning and their own sense of right or wrong, no matter what. And as I mentioned earlier, to love life. She had strong family values. She was very inclusive, not just for family, but the family that you were born with, but she expected you to include within that circle of family all of your family that you are chosen to have. Those that you're not related to, but you need to be close with. She looked out for them and wanted you to look out for them just as you would members of your family. And that large extended family that she had, 11 brothers and sisters, she stayed in touch with them. And always when she arrived somewhere, she would look up people and find even more of that extended family. 5 years ago, she organized the family reunion and even organized a book about the family that's cherished to this day. As I mentioned, her dining room table, it had 3 leaves in it, and it could be extended for whatever was needed to accommodate. There was always room and always an abundance of food and love. In fact, so much openness was that the house that she and Judah designed, as the children described it, had this open concept, maybe before open concepts were such a concept, that all the rooms opened out onto this main room so that wherever you were still part of it. You were still part of the center of things. And as we've mentioned, she was a champion of the downtrodden, always looking out for those less fortunate. Her work with the Jewish Family Services with Soviet refuseniks, and how she enlisted this incredible network that she had of people that she might even only know tangentially or through a friend of a friend. She would call you up. She would never ask for something for herself, but she had the chutzpah and the foresight and the menschlichkeit to ask for anything for someone else. I pray and I hope the lessons of her life are not lost on just this generation, but that they continue to be taught and shared l'dor vador from generation to generation. May her memory be a blessing. Amen. Friends, we have one more prayer to say here, and then we'll proceed to graveside for the interment and the saying of Kaddish. As we recite the Cottage Prayer, as we recite this next prayer, El Malei Rachamim, it's a prayer for Barbara's soul. If you're able to rise, please do. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Amitzehem Enocha Nechona, Tachat Kanfecha Shechina, Im Keroshim Utchorim, Kizochar Akiyamasirim, Et Nishmat, Bracha Bat Shlomo V'Shoshana, Shechalal Olama, Baal Harachamim, Yastirecha, Besetek Nafav Olamim, Vayitzrur, Bitzrur Chachayim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanuach, B'shalom, Al Mishkava, V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Barbara, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up with the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And we say together, Amen. Friends, we're going to go from here and proceed behind the casket to the graveside, which is over there. The ground is a little soft around the grave, so just be careful and be aware. And then at graveside, we will say Kaddish and place earth for the interment. I want to make one other explanation here instead of there. It is Jewish custom to bury sacred texts that have God's name in it in a cemetery and often in a grave. And as we come to the end of the year, I collect books that people have brought, Seder, Sidurim and Tanachim, books that are called Shemot, books that have God's name in it, in my office. And so it's at this time of year that we bring a box to the cemetery, which is called a Geniza. And we'll place those books in the grave with Barbara after placing earth, so that she's surrounded by words of God. And so we'll be doing that as well. I'll ask those that are pallbearers to please come stand by the casket as we proceed. Those that are watching online, we will bring the camera with us down. Thank you. Yeah. If you'll follow behind the casket, please. Mechalkel chaim bechesed, mechayei metim berachamim rabim, somech noflim verofei holim umatir asarim, umken atolishanei afar, micha mocha ba'al givorot, umidom melach, melech mimitum chayei umatmiach Yeshua. Mechalkel chaim bechesed, mechayei metim berachamim rabim, somech noflim verofei holim umatir asarim, umken atolishanei afar, micha mocha ba'al givorot, umidom melach, melech mimitum chayei umatmiach Yeshua. Mechalkel chaim bechesed, mechayei metim berachamim rabim, somech noflim verofei holim umatir asarim, umken atolishanei afar, micha mocha ba'al givorot, umidom melach, melech mimitum chayei umatmiach Yeshua. I think this is a wide turn. No, we're okay. We're okay. Mechalkel chaim bechesed, mechayei metim berachamim rabim, somech noflim verofei holim umatir asarim, umken atolishanei afar, micha mocha ba'al givorot, umidom melach, melech mimitum chayei umatmiach Yeshua. Mechalkel chaim bechesed, mechayei metim berachamim rabim, somech noflim verofei holim umatir asarim, umken atolishanei afar, micha mocha ba'al givorot, umidom melach, melech mimitum chayei umatmiach Yeshua.
No. That's it this time. Eternal God has given in wisdom beyond our understanding. God has taken it all. Blessed be thy glories and blessed be thy We're going to recite the Cottage Prayer now. The prayer doesn't speak at all about death. In fact, it's a prayer that reminds us that at the time when we might feel most estranged from God, most separated from our community, that we need to find community and to do the hard work of finding faith in this time. It's a proclamation of faith. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah. Amen. Yamad yivrach yerutev yamlif malchuteh. V'chayachon v'yomechon u'chayei l'chol beit Yisrael v'agalav izman kariv v'yimaru. Amen. Ehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olam me'omayah. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh. Yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yit'alal shemei l'kudesha baruch. V'hela min kol birchata v'shirata. Yishtachata v'nechamata. Damin ron v'alma v'yimaru. Amen. Ehei shlama Rabbah min shemayah. V'chaim aleinu v'yalko Yisrael v'yimaru. Amen. V'osei shalom b'mromav v'ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'yalko Yisrael v'yalko yoshvei teva v'yimaru. Amen. I'm going to ask the family now to come forward to place earth, and after they've each done it, if we can all come forward to help fulfill this mitzvah. It's a commandment upon every Jew to have a Jewish burial, but not something we can do for ourselves. So we entrust it to our family and our friends to be there, to be those gentle hands, to tuck us in at this final moment. After we've created a layer of earth over the casket, we'll place the books that I mentioned before, and then continue to cover them with earth as well. There are shovels on both sides. If you want to come around, just please be careful of the boards here.
is too soft. Let's go there.
So friends, if you're able to, we need to fully cover the casket with earth. Get on the sides. Yeah, you have to raise the level of the earth all the way up to the It's a bit easier when the dirt's not wet. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Ose shalom bimroma, Uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, ve'imru amen. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yase shalom, Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imeru, amen. May her memory always be for a blessing. Amen. There's a Shiva meeting tonight via Zoom. I think we said 7. Is that what we put? 7 o'clock, the link went out with the announcement. The traditional words of comfort that are offered to the family, if you repeat after me. Hamakom Yenachem, Etchem, Batoch, Sha'ar, Avalei, Sion, V'Yerushalayim. May God console you among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. May her memory always be for a blessing. Amen. Thank you all very much. Those that are watching online, this concludes the live stream.